Hey, looks like I'm live now. So I think I'm going to be doing this debate here in a little bit. But first, I'm going to try watching this video.
The phone, that screen that you're watching this through, it's not yours. You think it's yours, and it is legally, but morally, ethically, actually, it's everyone's. What is property? Well, according to Proudhon, property is theft, although not quite all property. As it turns out, Pierre-Joseph Proudhon was the first self-declared anarchist. He wrote What is Property in 1840. He was a wide-ranging and difficult writer. He wasn't a system builder. He was critical of utopianisms, and he was fascinated with contradictions. For Proudhon, the ideal society was a contractual one, where individuals are free to arrange their relationships under conditions of justice. But for justice to flourish, its laws had to be known to all. To understand his theory of property, then, it's important to start with his idea of justice. He wrote, "Justice is the central star which governs society, the pole around which the political world revolves, the principle and regulator of all transactions. Nothing takes place between men save in the name of right, nothing without the invocation of justice. Justice, nothing else. That is the alpha and omega of my argument. A human interaction is guided by laws, which are the product of calculations, feelings, or facts about what we perceive to be right. We live, in other words, by socialized rules. We queue, we say thank you, we pay tax, we drive on one side of the road, we have the right of free speech up to the point of causing disturbances. These rules are the rules of justice. They are intended to make us all freer in the long term. One of those rules is property. We can own stuff. It's ours exclusively. But, Proudhon asks, what if property was a miscalculation, a misunderstanding of the moral law, a mistake that
Can you
we've
hear
been
me?
paying for ever since, an original sin that has led to many of our problems? Let's really think about it. What is...
Can you hear me too? All right, cool, thanks.
property? Property, normalized as it's been, seems to be natural to us. But why is that? Is it a natural right, a natural law, a right of the strong against the weak? It seems like an absolute right, the right to hold property, like the right to life, liberty, or equality before the law. But take a look at the right to life and liberty.
Thanks.
Rights are the question of what is absolute. Equality before the law is absolute. It cannot be sold, nor can your life or liberty. This would seem perverse to us. But property isn't absolute in the same way.
No.
It's taxed, for example. Some of the actual property is taken by the government. Surely it can't be an absolute right then. Proudhon says that if that was the case, if my possessions are my own, no one has a claim upon them. Think of that list of socialized rules and rights. Behind all of them, behind any law, is the idea of justice. What's correct,
That is the idea,
right,
yes.
moral from a social point of view. So what's the justification, and note just at the beginning of justification here, for property? Well, philosophical justifications for property usually come in two types. Arguments for occupation and arguments for labor. We'll start as Proudhon does with occupation. He writes, the right of occupation, or of the first occupant, is that which results from the actual, physical, real possession of a thing. I occupy a piece of land,
Lock-in.
and the presumption is that I am the proprietor until the contrary is proved. In a state of nature, I stumbled across some land with an apple tree on, for example, and put up a fence and occupy. So the land is my property. But, Proudhon argues, if this is the case, occupation is simply toleration. In other words, it requires the consent of others. It must be mutual. If it's a right, it must be reciprocal. The theatre, says Cicero, is common to all. The occupation argument implies equality. He says that thine and mine are signs and expressions of personal but equal rights. In other words, the right to occupy is equal to all. The earth is given to us all in common to sustain us. So portioning it up must wrong no one. This, of course, has important repercussions today, where much of the land.
So I just want to pause this because I don't want to get copyright claimed or whatever. This is the channel Then and Now, really good channel. Go subscribe. But I'm watching this because I think he does a really good job of explaining Proudhon's perspective on property, and that will probably come up in the debate that will hopefully be happening pretty soon. So I'm going to keep playing this and try to get my head around this or whatever. I also want to make sure everything worked properly. It seems like it does, though, so that's great.
Land is already divided. He asks if the first occupants have occupied everything, what are the newcomers to do? What will become of them, having an instrument with which to work, but no material to work upon? Each man needs to occupy some area to live, some material to work with. If 100,000 men settle on an island with no inhabitants, does each not have a right to 1/100th of the land? He writes, not only does occupation lead to equality, it prevents property. For since every man, from the fact of his existence, has the right of occupation, and in order to live must have material for cultivation on which he may labour, and since, on the other hand, the number of occupants varies continually with the...
Yeah, he's right about this. Proudhon is right about this. It sort of naturally would lead to equality. That's what kind of comes up later. The idea that, if we, for 100 men or so land on an island, we split that up, would not each be entitled to 1/100th of the land. But then as population grows in this area, whatever, right, what happens to the property or whatever? It goes through a number of different kind of contradictions and ideas on why property doesn't really make sense, certainly not as a right, and comes to a number of different conclusions. This is kind of about how he comes to the conclusion that it's robbery, but he also said that it was liberty, murder, and impossible. And so a lot of times when Proudhon said that he was talking about, when he said it was liberty, he was talking about the intention of the law. When he said it was murder, robbery, and impossible, he was talking more about the right of increase, how, through taxation, rent, interest, things like that, you don't really need to work, the kind of absentee owner, right? You can own a piece of property and then, just charge whoever uses it or whatever. And you don't really need to do anything with it, to own it. So kind of like robbery. Said it was murder, a similar sense to the movie Free State Jones. Was a pretty good movie. Matthew McConaughey's in it, but he says to this Confederate soldier who takes a bunch of their grain and stuff, he says, take a load of grain, we got nothing to feed the hogs. We got nothing to feed the hogs. We got nothing to send to the smokehouse in the winter. We got nothing to send to the smokehouse in the winter. We starve in the winter. Now that sounds like murder. So that's kind of like, you could interpret that in a Proudhonian sense, I suppose. Then when he said it was impossible, he was basically saying because it asked for something from nothing. And that right of increase, you don't actually have to do anything from it, but you can still get something from it. That's something for nothing. So yeah, I think this is a pretty good video, though. He talks a lot about, Proudhon's analysis, and it does a pretty good job of explaining it. Proudhon's a very complex writer, and so it can take a bit to understand exactly what he's saying. But I think that this guy does a really good job explaining in this video of what he was referring to, and sort of breaks it down in more like common language and everything, so it can more be understood. And all his videos are pretty great. Then and now, like I said, I'd recommend checking it out for sure.
Births and deaths. Consequently, occupation is always subordinate to population. So property cannot be absolute, cannot just be ours. We're simply possessors, temporary holders under the supervision of society.
Stewards, if you will.
Land, a requirement of our very liberty, cannot be appropriated. Property, then, is theft. He asks, if water, fire, and air cannot be appropriated, then why should land? Comte said that if a man should be deprived of air for a few moments only, he would cease to exist, and a partial deprivation would cause him severe suffering. A partial or complete deprivation of food would produce like effects upon him. Man needs light from the stars, Earth's atmosphere, fresh water, and of course, land. A man who should be prohibited from walking in the highways, from resting in the fields, from taking shelter in caves, from lighting fires, from picking berries, from gathering herbs and boiling them in a bit of baked clay. Such a man could not live. So we are justified in using these things as long as we guarantee the use of them to others. We come back again and again to a type of equality. He writes, equality of possessions, equality of rights, liberty, will, personality are so many identical expressions of one and the same idea. The right of preservation and development, in a word, the right of life. But we do still need to possess some things to live. We must have some right to use property or possession in some way. If this right does not come from occupation, where does it come from? Proudhon now turns to those that have argued that property is justified by labour. John Locke's theory of property is the most well-known of these. He said that a person has a right to an object as property when they have laboured upon it. Without this right, how could people live, after all? I come across an apple tree. I labour by plucking an apple from it. I then have a right to that because of the value.
Okay, looks like this is probably going to start pretty soon. So he just said, I said, ready whenever you are. He said KK, so I'll just wait till he calls or says something else, or I'll message him in a minute. Okay, he said soon, so hopefully soon then. Let's read through this thing that he sent me a little while ago. So it says, stay strapped or get clapped. A profound truth in nature. A strap is a form of technology. If another individual or group has better evolved technology, you are relatively unstrapped and will not survive without adaptation. So, I mean, that's true enough, I guess. An economy is an ecosystem whose participants have a certain level of intelligence, at minimum being able to perform agriculture and voluntary trade. This could be described as having free will. I could nitpick and that I would argue that economies predate agriculture, but and I don't actually believe in free will, but I guess you could describe it like this. All actions from those with free will are displays of wants. Even something as basic as survival is a want. Survival requires the consumption of external sources of energy. So this is true. And I like how he, said survival is a want. I actually would agree with that. This is kind of where, wants and needs get kind of, they kind of intersect. An individual's want to own things may come from a want for the certainty of future survival. Surplus food production is an example. So, yeah, I agree with that. If other individuals in your environment own things which give them some certainty of future survival, you must own more things than everyone else in your environment to be best adapted individual in it. Those who adapt the best are naturally rewarded with the most. If individuals in your environment own things which give them some certainty of future survival, you must own more things than everyone else in your environment to be the best adapted individual in it. Now, this I sort of take issue with because I think it makes some individualist assumptions that I don't really like. So like up here, he says, being able to survival is a want. And so we talk about like external sources of energy, so like food and water, things like that, which we all need to survive. But here he seems to be making an individualist assumption that I don't really like because human beings are social animals, and so I would argue that socialization, having a social support system, is just as much a need or like a want or survival kind of thing that as food and water. And so like you say, if other individuals in your environment own things which give them some certainty of future survival, you must own more things than everyone else in your environment to be the best adapted individual in it. I don't think that is true. If you have a society that takes care of people in its society and has access to the things that people need and people are able to get the things that they need in a society, then I don't think that any one individual has to be more like we can take care of each other and that can make everybody better off. And so this gets too individualist for my liking. Those who adapt the best are naturally rewarded with the most wants, including survival. To take away from this is to punish adaptation and risk future survival. Those who adapt the best are naturally rewarded with the most wants. So, I mean, yeah, maybe in a sense, but like, there are other things that kind of go into this, right? I mean, like, a system isn't just necessarily going to reward everybody with the most wants, depending on how that system is set up, right? This again sort of makes some individualist assumptions. It kind of makes me think of great man theory, which I reject wholeheartedly because it's nonsense, right? I mean, who's the best, right? I mean, what is the best, right? I mean, the best is so relative depending on what exactly we're talking about, right? I mean, like, it's kind of like when people ask, oh, who's the smartest person in the world, right? Where you think like, and a lot of people might, I saw this question on Twitter, right? And a lot of people were saying Albert Einstein. And yeah, sure, maybe Albert Einstein comes to your mind and you say, who's the smartest person in the world? But like, then I just ask a question like, you really think Albert Einstein is like knows more about economics than Adam Smith? It's like, well, no, of course not, right? That's absurd. Okay, well, so then is Adam Smith smarter than Albert Einstein? Well, no, because then you'd ask, does Adam Smith know more about physics than Albert Einstein? And again, no, of course not. That's absurd. So, like, who is the best here is also sort of relative, right? I mean, the best at what? They're going to be, and are they going to be naturally rewarded, or is that kind of a social system? Which, I mean, social systems are part of nature, but your social system has to have these systems in place in order for that to work. So, like, especially if we're talking about economically speaking, you have to have those sort of incentives in place and everything, but you also have to have the opportunity and the access, right? Because if we just sit here and like, this just kind of survivorship bias, right? We assume everybody that has the most of their wants met, including survival, are the best at what they do. Well, we're just seeing the people that have the most of their wants, right? We're not necessarily seeing the people that weren't able to become good at things, right? The people that missed out because they lacked opportunity, right? The people that had to spend all of their time getting just a little bit of food and water, and they couldn't spend any of their time building other alternative skills to get more of their wants met outside of survival. So, I think there's a bit of survivorship bias going on here, and it's relative, and again, kind of like, great man theory. So, when individuals voluntarily trade things, both parties want the other things more than they want their own thing. Others must want the things they own thus buy more than they want the time it takes to obtain them. So this is true. This is just like, subjective theory of value, right? If you pay a price, you're willing to pay it. Now, voluntarism, although voluntarism is good, don't get me wrong, this actually, both parties want the other thing more than they want their own thing, is actually true even outside of voluntary trade, right? Say like if someone puts a gun to your head, says give me all your money, and you give them the money, that shows that you value your life, you want your life more than you want your money, which makes perfect sense, but that is certainly not a voluntary transaction. But the idea of this still holds true, even outside of voluntary interactions. An individual's time only has economic value if it is used to produce things that others want. This is true for everybody. Economic value if it is used to produce things that others want. This is true for everybody. Yes. I mean, yeah, sure. Labor is work that adds value to an economy. But, I mean, there are things that we're not compensated for, even though others do want these things, right? Like I brought up in my debate with Liquid Zulu, I mean, we know that people want children to be raised properly. We know this, right? People want to continue the human species, so people want people to give birth to children and everything. And, when you give birth to children, we literally call that labor, but nobody's compensated for it. So, although that's true, we know for a fact that in our society there are things that have economic value because they do produce things that others want, but people don't get compensated. They're not rewarded with their wants, kind of going back to this other one. Money arises when a fungible, portable, divisible, durable, scarce thing becomes the most wanted fungible, portable, divisible, durable, scarce thing in that environment. And economic value is then used to measure the economic value of everything else economic actors want. This happens when an economic environment has over 150 economic actors in it. Dunbar's number. Barter can no longer be trusted because the majority of economic actors in your environment are strangers to you. So, the problem with barter is not that people are strangers to you. That actually is probably more of a problem with credit, though modern times have actually solved this issue with like credit scores, right? So like I can, in old times, like, debt, if you look into like David Graeber and stuff, debt was arguably the first kind of currency, not barter. In like smaller communities, and this you can make this work in these smaller communities because everyone knows each other, they trust each other, right? All of that. Now, money comes around for a couple of reasons. For one thing, it kind of helps monarchies and people in charge of whatever centralize their power even more. They can control gold mines, require people to pay gold in taxes. Then everybody wants gold all of a sudden, so they kind of create a demand for this money. But it also allows for strangers to come into your market and still do exchanges, right? Whereas credit, sort of requires this sort of trust. However, in modern times, we don't really require this for credit, right? And it's the same way that I can go into a bank that I've never been in before and I can apply for a loan. And depending on my credit score, that's pretty much going to depend on if I get the loan or not. That's going to entirely depend on my credit score. It's not going to depend on how many people in that bank know me or if I've ever been there before, right? Even if I've never been in that bank, but I have an incredibly high credit score, I'm likely to get that loan. And so credit scores sort of solve this issue, and things have gotten better even with like blockchain technology, which is sort of called a trustless system, where we don't really need trust to make these kind of things work. Though, I mean, there is still kind of trust in there, even though it's called a trustless system. Also might take issue here with scarce. Now, money shouldn't be too scarce. It also shouldn't be too abundant, right? You want something that kind of a mix between those. You want to find that middle ground. If money's too scarce, then you limit how much your economy can grow, because you can't have. This is like why we could never go back to the gold standard. As many people want to, our economy would shrink. It would shrink so drastically because our economy is much larger than it was when we were on the gold standard, and we couldn't just not go back without drastically shrinking our economy and thereby pretty much fucking up everybody's quality of life. So you don't want your money to be too scarce. You also don't want it to be too abundant, because if it's too abundant, then you end up with too much money in the economy, right? Inflation. Too abundant, inflation. Too scarce, deflation. So yeah, divisible, portable, fungible. Yeah, it definitely has to be fungible. Got to be portable. Yeah, because otherwise, how would you? Though, I mean, there are examples of people that will use giant like rhinestones, I think, or whatever, you know, as a form of currency. And mainly these were actually done on kind of ledgers because they weren't actually portable. So people just kind of keep track of what was owed, and it was measured by this rhinestone that wasn't actually portable. Divisible, the rhinestones were kind of divisible, but they were so large that, dividing them into any sort of portable, durable, that's sort of like, yeah. But like, I mean, again, ledger money, kind of it solves all of this, right? I mean, it's not too scarce, not too abundant. It's durable, as durable as a ledger is. Divisible, yeah, it's divisible as you want it to be. It's portable, yeah, absolutely. And fungible, right? It's interchangeable with you just, yeah. So ledger money pretty much meets all of these. The economic value of a thing is a product of supply and demand, or haves/wants. Wants are the denominator of economic value. The economic value of a thing with the immutable supply solely fluctuates with the economy's want level of that thing. Yeah, that's probably fair enough. technology is a byproduct of an economy's collective knowledge. Since the invention of the printing press and the internet, economy's collective knowledge can never go down over time. Well, it hasn't, but I don't know if that means it could never. There are numerous things that could still result in collective knowledge going down. Though, of course, these things have led to a drastic increase in collective knowledge. I don't know. It seems like kind of an assumption here that they would have to, that like these things, that like because the internet and the printing press or whatever, there's no possible way that collective knowledge could decrease. That seems like a pretty big assumption, I guess. As technology inevitably accelerates, economically valuable things become easier to produce with less time cost. But the wants of economic participants are unlimited, so demand for things increase as things become easier to produce, causing them to retain their economic value. Well, I don't actually think that the wants of economic participants are unlimited. Like, maybe like all in an aggregate, more so, but even that's hard to say. Though, I mean, one participant's wants is certainly not unlimited. This is, I know, sort of the central problem of economics, but I mean, there's a problem with the central problem of economics, and it's that, right? It's that maybe this makes sense on an aggregate, but it certainly doesn't make sense with an individual, right? Like I could imagine a society that met all of my wants, right? That everything I wanted, I got, right? I could imagine such a society. But then the question is like, well, what about you? What about like other people? Right? Do they have everything that they want? And in an aggregate, we're certainly closer to having unlimited wants, but on an individual level, not so much. A price is a ratio of the economic value of one thing relative to another thing, both of which have supply and demand. Thing one, supply demand. Thing two, supply and demand. Yeah, that's probably fair enough. I feel like though that validates mutual credit, because that's kind of the whole idea, or like at least an all commodities backed currency where currency can be backed by everything. Rather than just gold or just this or that. Who's calling? Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Oh, hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
Oh, good. Can you hear me and stuff? Yeah, it
Yeah, I can
seems
hear
like
you.
it. All right.
Yeah. Hey, I just want to make sure this is cool. I'm streaming this on YouTube. Is that cool?
All right. Yeah, it's cool.
All right, yep. Yeah, so yeah, good to finally do this. How's your holidays going?
Oh, it started lagging. I think when you started streaming, your voice was lagging. Can you talk again?
Oh yeah. No, I just said it's good that we can finally do this now. How your holiday season going?
Maybe it's me lagging. Hello?
Hello?
I cannot hear you.
Oh damn.
Closing out my other tabs. Here, I'll call you right back.
All right.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
That's weird. I can hear you fine. Okay, hold on.
Oh, whoa, I heard something clear. Hello?
Hello? Hello?
No, I don't hear anything now.
Damn.
Oh, man. Oh, brother. Worst case scenario, we can just do like a phone call,
Yeah.
but don't stream my phone number.
No, I won't. Yeah, hold on. Let me see what I can.
All right, I heard something.
Are you hearing anything or?
Is there a better thing than Discord or I don't know. I don't know if you can even hear me.
I can hear you like perfectly.
Oh, you hear me perfectly. Okay, well, I mean, worst case scenario, maybe you just type and I'll talk, or we could do a phone call, or type something back
Yeah.
at me, my man. Shoo-loo-loo-loo-loo-loo-loo-loo-loo. Shoo-loo-loo-loo-loo-loo-loo-loo. Shoo-loo-loo-loo-loo-loo-loo-loo-loo.
This is so weird.
Shoo-loo-loo-loo-loo-loo-loo. All right, I kind of heard what you said, but it was all robot-y and then it cut out. Yeah, just lower the volume or the quality of the stream, close some tabs out, something to speed up the internet connection, or we could just do a phone call,
Yeah.
or we could
Hold
try
on.
something else other than Discord, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe we could try Zoom. Hold up. I'm just trying to.
Or is there somebody else on the Wi-Fi? Maybe you got to plug it into the router.
Yeah, I'm plugged in. Hold on. Oh, God damn it. Okay.
We could try Zoom if you want. All right. I don't have Zoom downloaded. You send me like a link that I could join.
Yeah,
maybe?
yeah, I can do that. Hold up. Yep.
We try that out. All right, cool. Hello?
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 Hey, I'm getting the link. I don't know if you can hear me. This is so weird.
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me now?